Welcome back to the channel. Today marks 41 days since I introduced these bee colonies into their new hives, and it's been 10 days since the last inspection. I usually inspect my hives every 10 to 14 days. Opening them any more often isn't a great idea. Bees appreciate a little peace and quiet. And honestly, they probably don't enjoy surprise visitors nearly as much as I do. During the last inspection, I carried out my biggest experiment so far. I split one colony into 3 separate nucleus colonies, or nukes, and placed them in the top box of the hive. Since taking 9 frames from a single colony would have weakened it too much, I only took 3 frames from the hive that had gone into swarm mode. It had developed more than 10 queen cells. Then I collected 3 brood frames from each of the other 2 colonies to complete the nukes. Today we'll find out whether that experiment was a success or whether the bees had a better plan than I did. We'll also check how the other 2 colonies are developing after receiving another hive box. We'll start today's inspection with the nucleus colonies because they're sitting right at the top of the hive. And honestly, they're the part I'm most curious about. Well then, let's open the first compartment and hope to find either fresh brood or even better, a brand new queen walking proudly across the frames. I carefully lift out the first frame, holding my breath a little. Somehow, I have a feeling there are going to be a few surprises today. Let's take a close look. Some of the sealed brood still hasn't emerged yet. Most of this frame was capped brood when I built the nuke, although there may have been a few older larvae close to being sealed. Oh, that's unexpected. The queen cell is still sealed. That's strange. When I made this nuke, all of the queen cells were already capped. By all the timelines I've read, they should have emerged within these 10 days. So what happened? Did the queen fail to develop, or is she somehow still inside? That's definitely not what I expected to see. Let's check the second frame. This one originally contained sealed brood as well, and now all of those young bees have emerged. You can see there are plenty of fresh workers covering the comb. When I created these nukes, I placed about 300 grams, roughly 10.5 ounces, of candy feed into each compartment. Every bit of it is gone. Fortunately, there's still some honey left on the frames, along with a little stored pollen, so they definitely aren't out of food. I'll set this frame aside for a moment. Still, no queen and no fresh eggs. I was really hoping to see at least one of those today. Alright, let's pull out the third and final frame. Whoa, now that's a surprise. They've built 4 emergency queen cells. This was the frame that contained very young brood when I assembled the nuke. Fresh eggs, 1-day-old larvae, 2-day-old larvae, almost everything was open brood. The queen had only just started laying on it. And now, 4 emergency queen cells. But here's what really puzzles me. Where did all that young brood go? Could the bees have actually eaten it because the colony was under stress or short on food? It's possible, but honestly, I don't know. At this point, I have more questions than answers. I expected this inspection to look completely different. Right now, I'm not even sure what the best next step is. For the moment, I think the smartest thing to do is simply leave them alone. They started raising 4 new queens, so I'll add another 300 grams of candy feed, put everything back together, and let nature continue doing its work. The colony still has plenty of adult bees, and I haven't noticed many flying out yet, which is actually expected. Most of these are still young nurse bees that haven't become foragers. One thing I do notice is how calm they are. Their wings are folded normally, and they're behaving peacefully. According to the beekeeping books, that's usually a good sign. It suggests the colony feels secure and is patiently waiting for its new queen. Alright, that's the first nuke inspected. Let's carefully close it up and see what the next one has in store. Let's inspect the next 2 nucleus colonies. Carefully lifting out the first frame. And what do we have here? In the center, there's still plenty of sealed brood. This was probably the frame that originally contained younger brood. The older larvae have now been capped, but there's no fresh brood, no eggs, no tiny larvae. That's strange. The good news is there's also plenty of honey, which is always reassuring. At least these young bees won't be going hungry. If you look closely, you can even spot some newly emerged worker bees. They're easy to recognize. They're slightly grayer, a bit fuzzier, and look almost like they're wearing tiny winter jackets. Let's flip the frame over. Exactly the same story. Capped brood in the center, but no fresh eggs, no young larvae. Definitely not what I was hoping to find. Alright, let's set this frame aside and keep looking. Carefully removing the second frame. This is the moment where I'm secretly hoping everything suddenly makes sense. Unfortunately, no miracle today. All of the sealed brood has emerged successfully, which is good news. But once again, no fresh brood. Nothing particularly interesting here, so let's move on to the final frame. Now this is interesting. Take a close look at this queen cell. See how it's been torn open from the side? That's usually a sign that the developing queen inside was destroyed before she could emerge. And here's another one, exactly the same. But this third queen cell, it's different. This one has been opened cleanly at the tip. That's exactly how a healthy virgin queen normally emerges. So, maybe she hatched successfully. Maybe she's already somewhere inside this little colony, quietly running across the comb while I'm completely missing her. At this point, I really don't want to jump to conclusions. The only sensible thing to do is give them a little more time. The third nuke tells a very similar story. Once again, no fresh brood. Some of the queen cells have already opened, but right here, we still have a sealed queen cell. That's actually quite surprising. If I remember correctly, I think this colony originally received an open queen cell, simply because I didn't have enough sealed ones to go around. So seeing a sealed queen cell now definitely caught me off guard. And here's something even more interesting. On the frame that originally contained young brood, the bees have built 3 emergency queen cells. These are replacement queen cells, raised from worker larvae after the colony realized it had no queen. And just look at their size. They're noticeably larger than the ones in the first nuke. Maybe that means they'll produce stronger queens. At least, that's what I'm hoping. Although, to be honest, by now I was expecting this inspection to look completely different. Still, the bees themselves seem perfectly calm. They're moving normally, doing their jobs, and the colony doesn't appear stressed. On the last frame, tucked away in the corner, I spot another queen cell. This one has been opened neatly at the tip. That's exactly what you'd expect after a virgin queen emerges. So perhaps she's already somewhere inside the hive, or maybe she left on her mating flight and simply hasn't returned yet. With bees, there always seem to be more questions than answers. Every time I think I figured something out, they invent a brand new mystery. For now, I'll add another 300 grams, about 10.5 ounces, of candy feed, carefully put all 3 frames back into the nuke, and give them another 10 days. At the next inspection, it'll be time to make some important decisions about their future. Hopefully, they'll surprise me, in a good way this time. Alright, let's close everything up and move on to the next hive. Now let's slowly move on to the main hive inspection. The weather today is not great. It looks like rain is coming in. We might not even have enough time to finish everything, but I need to check them now because I'm leaving for a week. So let's open the first frame. And what do we see? Very strange. In the third box, I find a frame full of fresh brood, 1-day-old eggs and young larvae. Wait, how did this even get here? All right, let's set it aside and check another frame. On the next frame, we have capped brood. So this actually makes sense. About 10 days ago, I placed this frame in the center with young eggs, and now everything is properly capped. Right on schedule. Now on the third frame, I see the queen, walking right across the comb in the third box. That's unexpected. She's clearly searching for a place to lay eggs, and from what I can see, she's already started laying again here. She tried to escape to the other side, but I'll show her again. What are you doing up here? This is supposed to be a honey storage box, not a nursery. Honestly, this hive is starting to surprise me more and more, and the main nectar flow is just around the corner. Will I even manage to harvest honey this year, or will all my experiments cost me the entire season? Let's move on. The next frame, nothing interesting. They haven't even started building it properly yet, even though there are plenty of bees. But if we continue, we need to check everything. Carefully pulling out the next frame, and here we go. Honey being stored. Good job, girls. Exactly as in the textbook. Although technically this should be a brood area frame, not a honey frame. Usually, the outer frames are for food storage, but here we see something different again. New comb being drawn, and honey slowly being brought in. This is a fresh frame, and in about 10 days, they've already started working on it. The outermost frame is almost empty, just a light wax coating, showing early interest. Give it another 10 days, and it will likely be fully drawn out. Let me take another look at the queen in better light. There she is again, running across the frame, searching for space to lay. That blue dot on her back means she was born in 2025. If everything goes well, and I manage to raise my own queens this year, I'll mark them with white paint so I can track their age. Because ideally, a queen should be replaced every 2 years. Alright, closing the upper box, and let's move down. I'm very curious what's happening below. And yes, if we had brood upstairs, then downstairs we have almost nothing. One frame is empty, just a bit of pollen and no honey. Let's check the center frame. Here we go, capped brood. That means 10 days ago, the queen was still working in the lower box. Wait, and here look, a queen cell, capped. Either I missed it during the last inspection, or the colony has already gone back into a strong swarm mode after I removed the previous queen cells. Well, I'll remove this one. Since it's the only one I see, maybe there are more, maybe not. Either way, it seems the swarm impulse has mostly been under control. Or at least, I hope so. And now this part gets even more confusing. Just honey. Only honey. Right in the center of the lower box. They keep surprising me. There should be brood here. Next frame, brood, but mostly already emerged, and no fresh eggs. 10 days ago there were young eggs here. Now everything is sealed. The previous honey frame has been expanded and filled instead, meaning the bees are prioritizing storage over brood in some areas. Next frame, capped brood, bees emerging, honey on top. But again, no fresh eggs. It feels like the queen has completely forgotten about this box. Yeah, something definitely needs to be done. The only big question is, what exactly? After this inspection, what I saw in this hive honestly shocked me a bit. I'm not entirely sure what the right next step is. So I've decided to leave this colony as it is for now. We'll see what happens over the next 10 days. There is still some brood in the upper box, a bit of honey below, and also empty space where the queen can lay eggs. So there is room to work. At this point, I think it's better to let the bees figure it out themselves. I'll come back and check again in 10 days. While I was assembling the third hive, I started thinking, maybe I need to do a much more detailed inspection of the other hives as well, frame by frame, and reorganize everything properly. Brood and eggs should go to the bottom, and the top box should be left mostly for honey. So I set up a more comfortable working table, took all 3 boxes off the hive stand, and started going through everything carefully, frame by frame. The first frame in the bottom box is empty. The second one, also empty. The third one, they've just started drawing comb. What is going on here? The fourth frame, again, empty. No eggs, no brood, just empty cells where bees have already emerged. At this point, it almost feels like there is no queen in this hive. But the bees are still calm, which makes it even more confusing. Again, empty frames, no honey, no brood, just signs of recent emergence. And here we have another frame full of sealed brood. That's great to see. But where is the fresh brood? Where are the newly laid eggs? I keep checking frame after frame, and one thought starts creeping into my mind. Where is the queen? Let's continue. In the second box, I pull out the first frame. More capped brood, but about 10 days old. That actually matches the timeline. 10 days ago, this brood was in development. Now it's just being sealed, so at least the cycle is still working. I move brood frames down where they belong. Next frame, more capped brood. Good. Then I finally see something reassuring. Fresh eggs, and I immediately feel much calmer. That means the queen is definitely alive. On the other side of the same frame, I can see brood at different stages of development, from about 3-day-old larva to fully sealed brood, ready to emerge. Let's pull the next frame. This one is completely filled with honey, so I'll leave it in the second box where it belongs. Now for the next frame. And there they are, freshly laid eggs. That's exactly what I was hoping to see. The queen is definitely alive and working somewhere nearby. This frame goes down into the first brood box. The next frame is also looking great. It contains brood of all ages, from freshly laid eggs to sealed brood that's only days away from emerging. The nurse bees are feeding larvae, while the foragers continue turning nectar into honey. This one goes down as well. Right beside it, I place a new foundation frame. From everything I've learned, placing fresh foundation between brood frames encourages the bees to draw comb much faster. The next frame also contains fresh eggs, so I add another empty frame beside it. Hopefully, by the next inspection in 10 days, these empty frames will be filled with brand new brood. Let's keep going. And there she is, the queen herself, marked with a blue dot, which tells us she was raised in 2025. Calmly walking across the comb, searching for the next empty cell to lay an egg. What a relief. Seeing a healthy, active queen after all that uncertainty is one of the best feelings in beekeeping. I'll put her back into the first brood box and let her get back to work. Next frame, almost empty, just a light wax coating. I move it down closer to the brood area to encourage faster building. So, along with the brood frames, I've added 3 new foundation frames to the first brood box. That's about the maximum I'd recommend adding at one time. Instead of placing them side by side, I spread them evenly throughout the brood nest. This gives the bees a much better chance of drawing them out quickly while keeping the brood area balanced. The last frame is a honey frame. So in total, out of 10 frames, I now have 1 food frame, 3 foundation frames, and 6 frames with 1-day-old brood. This feels like a strong setup. Enough work for the bees for the next couple of weeks. They'll raise brood, develop new bees, and expand the colony. As the sealed brood in the upper boxes continues to emerge, The queen will gradually shift her laying pattern upward and later come back down as space opens again. Next frame, capped brood again, and then another frame, more honey, and then again, brood emerging, but no fresh eggs here. It feels like the brood nest has shifted upward. And then I start forming a theory. Maybe this happened because of how I reorganized the hive earlier. When I added the second and third boxes, I moved brood frames upward, and maybe that caused a vertical shift in the brood nest. The queen might have followed the brood upward, while honey slowly filled the bottom. And now she may simply be avoiding laying in the lower box, because she sees it as filled space. So I make a decision. All fresh eggs go to the bottom box. Capped brood stays in the middle. Honey frames go to the top box. Brood in the second box will support growth, and the third box becomes mostly a honey zone. How do you even describe that feeling? When you pull out a frame and see fresh, young nectar, so aromatic, it's almost already honey. It's so tempting, you just want to dip your finger in and taste it right there. Maybe that's why beekeepers have those mesh masks, to protect us from eating all the commercial honey straight off the frame. Meanwhile, I continue the inspection. Another beautiful, freshly drawn frame, already filling up with nectar and honey. I move it to the upper box. I hope that in about 10 days, when I open the hive again, all these honey frames will be fully filled. Another frame, and again, honey. Excellent buildup. I place it into the third box. Next frame for inspection, also actively being drawn out and filled with nectar. But honestly, as I'm now watching these recordings while editing, I can see the colonies are not very strong. Not all 3 hives are fully covered with bees. Somewhere I clearly made a mistake, because by the end of June, the colonies should have developed more strongly. Now I still have free space in 2 boxes, but from the first box, I removed empty frames where brood had already emerged and no new eggs were present. I mainly placed those into the second box so the queen can start laying there again soon, maybe even today or tomorrow, as soon as I reassemble the hive. I also add 1 undrawn frame and let them build it out. Let them work. And now I put the second box back into place. Now that I've set up 2 brood boxes for colony development, I need to restrict the queen so she doesn't move up into the third box. For this, I use a queen excluder, with small enough openings for worker bees to pass through, but not the queen. This way, the third box is protected for honey storage. I mounted this grid neatly into a wooden frame, and for better visibility, I painted it orange. I think it also looks quite nice that way. And with that, I finished the inspection of this hive, put everything back together, and I hope that in 10 days, I'll see capped honey in the third box and young brood in the second. And now it's time for the first hive. Honestly, I'm already a bit tired from all this excitement, and it's quite difficult to film everything at the same time. I was recording on 2 cameras for YouTube and also on my phone for shorts. Working alone with bees is not easy. First of all, I'm wearing gloves, and second, my hands are completely sticky with honey. At minimum, this deserves a like from you. Now I'm disassembling the first hive in the same way as the second one, carefully, box by box, placing everything on the table to inspect every single frame and understand how the colony is developing. And now, already knowing what's coming, I can see this is probably the strongest colony. There are more bees here, and the heaviest boxes are full of honey. The first frame contains honey, pollen, and larvae. Second frame, pollen and brood. Not bad for the first level. Another frame, completely filled with brood, just about to emerge. Beautiful. It really feels like everything is exactly as it should be. Oh, what is this? A queen cell. Let's remove it. Strange. There were no queen cells during the last inspection. It's well formed, and there is already an egg inside. That doesn't really make me happy. The brood pattern is very dense and fully packed. Could it be that the queen is running out of space and the colony is entering a swarm mode? You know the saying that you can watch for three things: how water is flowing, how fire is burning, and how people are working. I think bees belong on that list too. You can watch them work endlessly. They are constantly in motion, always busy, and somehow it never gets boring. And look, they are even building swarm cells directly on the frame. That's unusual. Normally this happens when the queen is old, but this is a last-year queen. And even more interesting, they already placed eggs inside these cells. That's not good. Let's continue. Next frame, calm, everything sealed, bees working normally. Good girls. Yes, by the way, worker bees are all females. Next frames, again queen cells. We remove them. That's already about 4 queen cells. Not good at all. I'll have to check again in 10 days. More work for me. Wait, here is the queen. Perfect. During this inspection, I managed to see all 3 queens from the original colonies we bought this year on May 18th. Now it's June 28th. She is alive, healthy, and working. Let her continue. Now I continue reorganizing the hive. As before, I move all brood frames to the bottom box, and honey frames and empty frames upward. If you ever wonder how much work is hidden inside one jar of honey, the answer is a ridiculous amount. To produce just 1 kilogram of honey, a bee colony performs around 20 to 50,000 flight trips. And each trip is not a vacation. It's a full-speed mission across thousands of flowers. A single bee usually brings back only a tiny drop of nectar, about 40 to 50 milligrams. That means 1 kilogram of honey is not made by one bee. It's made by an entire city working non-stop. Now imagine this on a frame. A standard Langstroth frame can hold roughly 2 to 3 kilograms of honey when fully filled. So that's already up to 100,000 bee flights per frame, sometimes even more. And I think it's time to bring in another box, a 4th one. Before putting everything back together, I remove the bottom board. It's a mesh bottom, and it definitely needs cleaning. A lot of debris has collected. Now I quickly reorganize everything. New frames will also be placed into the split zone again. Honey frames will go into the 4th box. Just like in hive number 3, this helps bees build comb faster. A little smoke to gently push the bees down, not to scare them, just to remind them that I'm temporarily moving into their living room. The 2nd box goes back in, fully occupied by the colony. Perfect. Carefully placed without crushing bees. Although, to be honest, no matter how careful I am, I still can't do this completely without losses. But I try my best. And the 4th box, now dedicated entirely to honey. I also install a queen excluder, so the queen cannot enter the honey super under any circumstances. Because when harvesting honey, we absolutely don't want brood or eggs in it. We place the 4th super on top, carefully setting it into position. And then the inner cover goes on, followed by the roof. And just like that, the hive is closed again. The bees are back to work, and I'm back to waiting for the next 10 days of mystery inside the box. That wraps up the inspection of all 3 hives and nucleus colonies. Hive number 1 turned out to be the strongest, stable, and fast developing. I only moved one brood frame into each new super, and that seems to have kept the structure balanced. Hive number 2 became noticeably weaker. Adding 2 brood frames each time likely pushed the colony upward too fast, and the hive structure got slightly unbalanced. Hive number 3 was a full experiment, chaotic, but still managed to produce a solid amount of honey, almost on the level of Hive 1. And the nucleus colonies surprised me the most. Next check is in 10 days. Thanks for watching. See you next time.